Joining us now from central London is the Vaccines Minister, Nadhim Zahawi. Very good morning to you. None of us want to be in that situation that Mark Wright has described so vividly. And one of the ways of getting out of it, of course, is the vaccine rollout that you are in charge of. Now, we have an issue, don't we? Because I know you've got a very ambitious target to vaccinate 15 million by the middle of February. Where are you at with, for instance, the over 80s? What proportion of people over 80 are currently vaccinated?
1/3. So we've vaccinated with first dose 1/3 of over 80s. So some of them already have that protection. Others in a couple of weeks' time will have that protection. Over the last past 3 days, another 600,000 over 80s have had letters to call or to go online and make an appointment in the 7 vaccination centres that we're launching today. There'll be more launched next week and the week after as well. And then we're going to bring on, obviously, the 200 community pharmacies, as well as the already 1,000 sites, predominantly the primary care networks. Some of them have pharmacies in them as well, who've been vaccinating. We still have a long way to go to get to that mid-February target, but I'm confident the NHS...
I don't want to be churlish. I really don't, because I think we've actually got off to a cracking start. When you look at the comparison to most other countries in the world, I think with the exception of Israel, America and China, we've vaccinated more people than anybody else. So this is good news, and you're off to a good start. But we all know how imperative it is to get it to the right people fast enough. And the front page of a Daily Mail is concerning today. They spoke to 28 care home providers, 556 homes, 30,000 residents. 17 said not a single resident had so far been vaccinated, and described haphazard and confusing communication, with 8 claiming they've had no details of when to expect vaccines. That is concerning. What comfort can you give to these care home providers that they're going to get contacted today and told exactly when they can expect to have their people vaccinated?
They will, Piers, because so last week, if you recall, on the 4th of January, we got the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. First 2 days, the chief medical officer wanted it to be only in hospitals. Then we rolled it out into the primary care networks. Now we've got 300 roving teams that go into care homes, doubling up to 600. Some areas have done all their care homes already. Others are beginning or starting now. So there is variation, and I'm not going to sort of shirk that, but that will change tomorrow and the day after and the day after, because they are absolute priority. They're the number one category on the list of 9 most vulnerable that the Joint Committee have given us to vaccinate. The AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine makes it much easier to get into care homes for those primary care.
The reason it's so important is there was a horrifying story that 13 of the 27 residents at Edendale Lodge Care Home in Crowhurst in East Sussex, very near the village where I grew up actually, had died with confirmed or suspected COVID since the 13th of December. I mean, that's a horrifying statistic, and it's reminiscent in a bad way of what was going on in care homes in the first wave of this pandemic. I mean, really, we're in a race against the virus, but we're particularly in a race to protect the most vulnerable people.
You're absolutely right, Piers. So let me give you another statistic. For every 20 people, residents of care homes that we vaccinate, we save 1 life. That is the highest return on the vaccination program that we can ever achieve. For every 250 people of the top categories, the top cohorts, we save 1 life. But for every 20, we save a life, which is why it's a priority. And you're going to see the focus very much, now that we've got Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, on the care homes and the staff that actually care for them as well. And of course, the over 80s, 1/3 already done, but more to do. And the staff that look after them that Mark just so beautifully expressed, the NHS frontline, that's also being vaccinated. And then we continue to move down the list.
Well, one of the issues seems to be travelling for the vaccination. So we've had a few people get in touch. Roy says, my mum's received a letter for her vaccination. When I tried to book her appointment, I got sent 18 miles from where she lives, where there's a vaccine centre. Suzanne says, my mum is 87, has received her letter to book. She lives in Weston-super-Mare, sort of down in the southwest. The nearest place available is 91 miles away in Birmingham. Tricia says, my 89-year-old mother received a letter to book. She lives in South Derbyshire. I went online. The nearest is Manchester, then Stevenage, then Swansea. We're in a lockdown. They don't understand, A, why they're having to travel at all and not just to their local GP surgery, but B, such a long way. I mean, that's going to be very impractical for the people you're trying to get jabbed.
You're absolutely right. So the first 7 vaccination centres that are launching today, the people who've been sent the letters, yes, it's about 45-minute drive to get to those. But next week, we're going to launch more, and the week after. And the aim with the primary care networks, and of course the hospitals, is no adult will be more than within a radius of 10 miles to get to a vaccination site. So they don't have to take that appointment if it's too far to travel and too difficult for them. They can wait for their primary care network to then contact them and actually vaccinate them much closer to where they're at. So
what have you learned? Sorry. No,
Sorry,
do
no,
finish.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we spoke to one of the Israeli health ministers earlier, and it was very interesting how well they're doing there. We know they've had communication with the UK government. What have you learned from what Israel's been doing, which is the best in the world in terms of vaccine rollout, that we can adopt here, or perhaps are already adopting?
That's a really great question. One of the things we've learned is the throughput, the speed at which they can actually vaccinate people through the mass vaccination centres. So, we want to make sure that we get to similar speeds of being able to vaccinate through the mass vaccination centres. They're doing it, I think, about 4 minutes per patient. And that's the sort of target that we want to make sure we deliver on, because at this stage, you're right, it's a race against time. The more vaccine I can get into arms quicker, the better it is, which is why we're only going with 200 community pharmacies and independent pharmacies, because they're the ones who can do the 1,000 a week that they can actually deliver. Now, in phase 2, we want convenience. You want to be able to walk down the road to your pharmacy and get your jab. But what I don't want is for vaccine so valuable to the most vulnerable to be sitting on shelves or fridges, which is why we're going for high throughput. What the Israelis did really well is that high throughput, and that's what we want to match.
Mr. Zahawi, what's going to happen with the restrictions? There is, as I understand it, huge compliance, huge support for the lockdown, and yet government ministers tell us that it's down to us and we're flouting the rules, and every flex of the rules costs a life, etc., etc. People are really suffering, frankly, under lockdown, and they've been in lockdown of some description or restrictions for almost a year. Is it true that you are considering toughening up the measures even further? And what might that look like?
So we do keep the measures under review. Compliance is higher now than November. We don't want to go even further. The measures are tough enough as it is. People are locked down. You stay at home is the message. And thank you, Good Morning Britain, for the work that you're doing in terms of getting that message across how serious this is.
Yeah, but when people see that there might be a threat to their bubbles, or that they might need, there is even one suggestion being reported today that we might be restricted to the number of times we go out, not per day, but per week. We might only be allowed out. I know you say you don't want to do these things, but I remember you saying that the day before the schools closed. So saying you don't want to do things is no guarantee they're not going to happen. Are you going to restrict, for instance, people's support bubbles? And are you going to restrict the amount of times they can leave their home during a week?
So no, as I said to you, I think we think that the lockdown is tough. My very, very, I hope, plea to everybody is, look, this virus loves social interaction. Now, I know we're all pro-social animals. We like social, it's in our DNA, but every moment where we think about socializing or actually do socialize, then you're giving the virus the opportunity.
Okay, sorry. So support bubbles are exactly that. They're two people getting together, and sometimes children as well. Can people rely on the fact their support bubbles are not going to be cancelled?
Well, we want to keep that exemption in place for two people to get together, absolutely. But all I say is, and I'm concerned because, supermarkets have done a tremendous job, but we want to make sure that people wear face coverings, masks in supermarkets, maintain the one-way system. If it's at capacity, queue outside. That's really important. In parks, you go out for exercise and exercise only, not for social interaction. I know it's hard because, as I say, we're all social animals, but please stay at home, because the way you give me the space to vaccinate more of the vulnerable more quickly is if we all follow the rules.
Okay.
These aren't rules and boundaries that we can push against because, they're there to sort of be
I'm just going to ask one last time. Can you guarantee that support bubbles will not be cancelled?
So the exemption is in place for two people to walk, exercise together. We don't want to, go tougher, but we review everything because ultimately this new variant is much more infectious. The viral load, as the scientists call it, is much greater.
The truth is, isn't it, Mr. Zahawi, you can't make any guarantees like that. You can't guarantee there won't be tougher restrictions because you may need to do them. And I think the time is long past where the government needs to stop making promises it can't potentially keep. It's better to stick to reality, and the reality is you don't know.
That's exactly what Piers, you're right. We have to review everything because we've got to make sure we bring this new variant under control whilst we vaccinate more of the vulnerable people more quickly. So it's only right that we review, but we think the actual lockdown is tough. If people follow the rules, stay at home. If you exercise, it's exercise only, not exercise and meet others. That is how the virus spreads. It loves that social interaction.
OK, we've got to leave it there. Look, the vaccination programme is off to a good start. I want to give you credit to you and the government. We've given you a kicking for the last year, most of it entirely justified. But I've got to say, our performance on this, comparative to most of the rest of the world, is excellent. Keep it up. We're relying on you. We are relying on you.
I'm grateful, genuinely.
All right, good to talk to you. Nadhim Zahawi, our vaccine minister.